Okay. Yeah. Hi, I'm Charles. Gorm and I are going to talk about standards and how to make cool stuff with them. I'm the chief standards guy at Opera, so I do boring management stuff. Gorm's a clever developer, so he'll show you clever, interesting stuff. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how the standards process works, what we do with it, and then Gorm's going to show it off a bit more. How many people know what W3C is? Everyone, nearly. How many people know what OMA is? Lucky people. I'll tell you. I have a small set of slides. Let's start by thinking about what we use standards for on the web is to make the web work better. So at Opera, we build a lot of different kinds of web browsers. We build browsers for mobiles, we build browsers for TVs, we build browsers for desktops, we build browsers for aeroplanes, Nintendos, all the toys. So if you think about how the web has been, this is yesterday's mobile web. You can still use it. This is an actual WML page, the original WML running in Google, or Google running it inside Opera. It's kind of dull and boring. They had special browsers, they had special systems. Opera did a bunch of work to make this possible, to put it in a normal browser. But normally you couldn't run this page. If you open this page in IE, you just get a mess. It's broken. Even more broken than a lot of things that are broken. And if you think about what I call yesterday's desktop web, the web that we came from, where people made beautiful things. CNN is a great example. It's lots and lots of stuff. It's a very familiar layout. It's only about, it's a bit less than half a megabyte. So it's quite good to download on a mobile phone if you want to find out what the news is. It's good if you hold a lot of shares in Sonera or Telia or someone. But the web has been, we've all seen it, font tags and frames and weird table layouts and nasty hacks, horrible little bits of CSS. How many people have written a pure CSS layout? How many people have tried to write a pure CSS layout and thrown up their hands in disgust? I've actually written some too. I do it all the time. This is a pure CSS layout, these slides. But it's been pretty painful. And we've had this whole, please upgrade to Netscape 4. I had a page that was please upgrade to Netscape 3, because I'm old. But stuff didn't work. You'd get a browser, someone would code for your browser, and I've done it too. I used to work for W3C, and when I worked for W3C as the standards organization, I would sit there and I'd do something like some SVG or some Xforms. I wrote Xforms coding to one browser made in Helsinki somewhere, no validation, just test in the browser and see if it works. And it worked in one browser until they changed their version number and fixed a bug, blew everything away. So the point about standards is to avoid that, right? One of the important things about the web is there's one of them. There's one web and you want it to be everywhere. You don't want to be building, unless you really have to, one site for Explorer, another site for Mozilla, another site for Opera, another site for Safari, another site for Mozilla on Macintosh, and that's before you get out of the desktop. The desktop is now less than half of web browsing. So most browsers available in the world today are not on laptop or desktop computers. And except for Opera, they're not even available for them. The desktop and the sort of what we think of as the web is still a huge market. It's very important. You want your stuff to work, right? So there's one web it goes everywhere, and it's built of things that, some things we know pretty well, HTML or XHTML, CSS. Has anyone used SVG? Woohoo! You're a star. Come and see me afterwards. I'll give you a squeezy ball or something. DOM, HTTP, AJAX, RSS. There's a bunch of things that are becoming fundamental to the web. Why do we build them on these things? Has anyone built Flash applications? Why do you build on Flash? That's one good reason. There is another good reason why people have built on Flash. There's an easy-to-use tool to make it. That's a very good reason. The other reason people often give is because it works. Right? You build stuff on Flash, and it works. You put it in the Flash player, and it comes out. And then you take it to Linux, and you discover that they didn't have a Flash player that was quite the same. And then you discover that actually the Flash plugin didn't work the same in all the browsers. So it's kind of painful. But the goal, whether you use Flash, whether you use web standards, is to have one reliable platform. What we all want as developers is to sit down, write our code, and be finished with it, yeah? Actually, what we all want as users is a reliable platform too. Put my timer on. So here we go. No, that didn't mean to use a mouse gesture. Okay. The web is really the user's web. They decide what's going to happen. So if 85% of the web works with IE, 85% of the users use IE, guess what? We're all stuck coding to IE, right? If a bunch of users use something else, then you sit down and you try and make it work for them. And users are sort of strange creatures. They all want cool, useful things. It turns out they all want things that are relevant to them. I want stuff that's relevant to me. And I'm not a gamer, so I don't really care about gaming sites at all. I don't mind if they work or don't work, or if they exist or don't exist. It doesn't change my life. But I like cooking. I care about cooking sites, and if they don't work, I get really upset. Luckily, cooking is simpler than gaming on the web, so I win. But there is another problem. Marketing people talk about the long tail, and the long tail really means there's a few hundred sites on the web that nearly everyone uses. Is there anyone here who has not used Google? Is there anyone here who has never done a search on Yahoo? MSN? Netscape search? You guys are young. Alta Vista? You're not young. So there's a lot of stuff out there that nearly everyone uses. But most of the stuff that people use, only a few people use it. Is anyone here into cars? Motorcycles? Fishing? Boating? Playing football? Yeah, I know. World of Warcraft. Come on, own up, someone's played it. Yeah, somebody is into everything, and there are millions and millions of sites out there that are very relevant to a small number of people, right? That's the long tail. You've got to make that work. So as a browser maker, we've got to try and make sure that stuff that people have done works for users, and there's lots of it. It's a frightening mess. As a developer, the long tail you've got is slightly different. Has anybody got a copy of, I don't know, say IE4? Netscape 4? Netscape 3? IE6? IE7? Firefox 2 Beta? None of you guys have Firefox 2 Beta? Opera 9? Well, hey. You're just saying that to please me. No, there's a lot of different browsers out there. And when you develop stuff, you've got to try and deal with all these browsers. Either way, oops. Didn't want to do that. I want to put my timer back. What we really want are standards, things that give us easier development. Users care about standards. How much do users care about standards? If you go and say to somebody, your grandmother, you say, "Grandmother, how much do you care about HTML?" Say, 0. How much do you care about electricity plugs? 0. How much would you care if you suddenly got sold 3 different electricity plugs for every device that you had? Oh yeah, that would be really annoying. People do care about it. They don't necessarily know. And there are good reasons. It actually gives you some value. So we're trying to build one standard web. My job, a little part of Gorm's job, and a lot of other people, Microsoft and IBM and Helsinki University of Technology, who made the X-Smiles browser I used to play with, and the Amaya development team in France, and hundreds of other people sit down and argue about how to make the standards and how to get them right. You have to actually agree on stuff to make it, which means it takes a long time. So what Gorm and I do at work is mostly go to nice places, go down to some beach resort or some nice skiing resort, go to a nice hotel. At 8 o'clock in the morning, walk into a room with about as much sunlight as this one, sit down with 20 other people, and spend the next 9 hours discussing things like the names of JavaScript methods. Should you have a focus method or a focus in method? Quick poll. Who thinks we should have a focus in method? Who thinks we should have a focus method in JavaScript? Okay. So the problem is there's a lot of deployed content using focus in already. If we break all that, we're going to cause a whole lot of pain. There's also a lot using focus. If we break all that, we're going to cause a lot of pain. What do? Sometimes we break it. Sometimes, we actually have both and just make everyone's lives miserable for another few years. Sometimes we come up with something new, break everything, or suggest to people that they should spend 5 years. We implement all 3 and tell people that for 5 years they should aim to be moving towards something new, because at some point we are going to break it. We're going to throw away the old support. It doesn't matter how you do it, but you have to bring it together. And it does happen if you get it right, if you get the standards process right, if you talk to the right people. And talking to the right people basically means talk to everybody you can. There's a lot of people out there building stuff. So there's a bunch of different groups making standards for the web. Anyone know IETF? A few people, they wrote the standards like RFC 822 is the standard that describes how email should be. It's very, very old now. It works. Everybody, anyone not get email? Anyone not get spam? It's fantastic. You can write lots of standard spam. But they make stuff like that. W3C, I guess you guys know, they make XML, HTML, CSS, DOM things. How many people know the What Working Group? None. The What Working Group is a few companies got together and said W3C is going very slowly and they're not even listening to the right questions. There are things we want to do that are simple, that browsers are implementing. Let's get together and implement them. Actually, what's nice about W3C is after we'd done this and gone off in a huff and taken our toys and gone to play with other people, W3C said, actually, if you come back and play with us, we will bring, and this was Opera, Mozilla, Apple, sort of usual desktop browser people. W3C said, we've got AOL and IBM and Yahoo and all these research types, BEA, and they actually want to make this thing work. They think there's some value in it. So they've asked us to ask you to come and play, so we all sit down together and get it right. That's when standards go right. Quite often you get 2 years of the whole thing just goes wrong. People go down some dead end, or somebody gets really excited about the thing they think is important and must have it, despite the fact that no one wants it and no one will use it. That's when standards go wrong. OMA, they made WML. Has anyone ever written a WML page? It's a horrible thing. It's technically actually a lot nicer than the HTML that was around at the time. It was brilliant. It was small, compact, clever, but you had to step away from the web and go and work in this separate world. In the end, that's a dumb idea. It comes back to, there's one web, and if you try and walk too far away from it in one go, you lose it. So, Opera, we put stuff on phones. 700 million phones that we're aiming our browsers at. There are 700 million phones out there today that you can put an Opera browser onto. Give or take 6 or 7. Pretty accurate number. Some of those are high-end phones, the fancy things that do the whole web and Ajax. You can run all those fancy Google services or Yahoo services or whatever services you build on a phone. Some of them are very simple phones running Opera Mini, a little tiny proxy. It's pretty limited in what it can do, but it's cheap and nice. Making those things work is about driving the standards, about building the standards so that you take account of. The phone I have on my charger, the crappy little phone running the crappy little browser that can do something sensible with a system, and the 4 megahertz PC with speakers and screens up to here and everything that can make the whole thing rock. Some stuff, games, is a great example of stuff that doesn't necessarily work everywhere. And it's very hard to make it. A lot of things, Google is an example of something. Everyone uses Google, wherever you are. Whether you're on phone, whether you're on a big PC, whether you're at school, whether you're at work. Google is really nice and simple, right? There's this little box and this stupid ad thing, image thing, and a couple of extra buttons. And it works everywhere. It's great. Other devices, set-top boxes, gaming systems, industrial measurement tools, things people run in factories. Boeing talk about why they want to use web systems. Boeing make very big airplanes, and they have guys who are sort of crawling around, hanging halfway upside down in the top of a 747, trying to work out which way the switches are supposed to go in the cockpit. And if the guy forgets, right now, he climbs down, crawls out of the airplane, climbs down the ladders, climbs out, goes and has a look at the machine and the big layout drawing, then goes all the way back up. The problem is it takes them 20 minutes to get in and out of the airplane. If you forget 2 things in a day, you've wasted nearly an hour. If you could use the same systems over here, your main systems, and on your phone or on your PDA or whatever the guy's got, he doesn't have to crawl out and run away. And if you can build it using web technology, not only does it go everywhere, but it's easy to get someone who can make it. How many people have built a user interface in Java? How many people have built an HTML page? Which one is easy? How many people think Java is easier? There's always one. Come and see me afterwards, down in a dark alley. So, one of the ideas is just make it simpler for people. Make it actually work so that anyone can build this stuff. There's some new in Opera 9. You guys don't need to know this. All these cool things we do. It's just getting more of the standards in place. Getting, ACID 2 is all about getting old stuff. Some of ACID 2 comes from the early 90s. And it's about actually getting it right for the first time in all of the little tiny cases. New stuff like widgets. Look, my widget has a message for me. That's a little bit of SVG. Yeah. I can't write JavaScript to save my life, right? I have built interfaces in Java, and they're horrible, and it takes me a long time. But I can write SVG. It's nice, simple stuff, and it runs everywhere. That's the kind of thing we're trying to actually achieve. So I'll take my own advice and shut up already. Go away. Thank you. There are no foolish questions, only fools who do not question, but Gorm is going to speak first. Please hold your questions. You can also come and talk to us afterwards. We're on the opera stand. Gorm and I will be there from midnight until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, so you've got lots of time to talk to us.
Thanks. Can you get this one to work or the other phone? Because I will play with the speaker. Yeah, it works? Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm going to show you why people like Charles and the marketing department guys in Opera is able to make widgets. It's really simple, perhaps a little too simple, since these guys can make it. But I'm just going to show you the really basic stuff, how to make the simplest widgets, and we'll take it from there with some questions. Let's see. So I work in the web applications department of Opera, which is a rather new department that has existed in 2 years. Opera has mainly been a browser focusing on the users and not so much on the developers. We want to change that because we see that users, they love to play with browser technology. Today, I think we are the second largest browser here at the gathering. There's one other browser, which is called Firefox, who nearly all of you use, I guess. A lot of people say they use Opera 9, but the figures say that a lot more people here, they use Firefox. And it's a very good browser. It got really good support for developers, and it's a browser made by developers, and we developers, we love it. Before I started in Opera, I used to use Firefox. Before that, I used Internet Explorer. And when Opera 9 came, I changed because I think it takes some time to get into the browser, but it's a really good browser, also for developers. Yeah, I know that. Opera 8 I started with, actually, but I really like Opera 9. So widgets, some users, they don't like widgets. They don't understand why we make widgets, because they don't need widgets, they say. But it's primarily because developers have something to play with, and users have something to play with, and people that like web technology can make something really simple. And the advanced stuff takes some time to make, but the simple stuff is really simple. So widgets are just small web applications that are based on open standards like HTML, DOM, CSS, XML HTTP request, JavaScript, and some WhatVG stuff like Canvas and audio. So basically everything that works in a browser should work on widgets. That's our plan for it. There's one change or one difference between pages and widgets, and that is that widgets, they get installed on the device. So you have a discovery file, you download the widget to the device, and it stays on the device. So next time you run it, it runs from the device, not from the web server. So yeah, that's basically what it is. We want to make it cross-platform. Today it works on Linux, it works on Windows, and all our desktop products. But we want to bring this into mobile phones. We have something called Opera Platform, which is more or less widgets that run on mobile phones already. And we want to when we get Opera 9 on the mobile phones, we want to have widget support there. And we get, we hope that on the V browser we will have widgets, because that's also Opera 9. We're not really sure if it will be there, but we hope so. We are going to have widgets on we are really committed to widgets or web applications that we can run on devices and all our devices, and hopefully also on our competitors' device. So we would like to standardize this. we see that already there are like 5, 6 different widget containers. You have things like the Google homepage API, and a lot of like small applications that are based on web technology. And we want this to be a standard already now. So that's what we are working for. Widgets can be very fun to create, but the simple ones are really fun to create. But the more advanced one, it can be very painful to create web applications compared to Java and sometimes also Flash, because the technology is a little bit more complicated when you get into the really hard stuff like CSS and yeah. But that will change, we think. We think the development tool will become better over time. So this is I will just show the really basic stuff. I don't know how many of you have made a widget or know what it is. It's not that many, so I hope it's okay. I guess you are experienced, but I hope it's okay to just show the very basic stuff that we need to run a widget. We need a file called config.xml, which is just a manifest discovery file, we call it. It must contain very simple stuff like the widget name. That's the human readable name that we will show in the browser when the widget is installed. It needs to have some initial height and width to get it running. It's just, I can quickly just show it how it would work, but let's use this. So it's very basic config XML file. We also need very basic HTML file. It's just plain regular HTML. Everything that works in a web browser should work in a widget. That's the plan. So you can use, you should be able to use Java applets. You should be able to use Flash. Everything that works in a web page. I think that you are very familiar with HTML, so I can just quickly, you know that this is just to trigger the standard mode, so you don't get quirks mode. A style, just to add some background to it. A widget is initially chromeless, so we need to add some background to it, so there can be something to drag it around with. And then just regular HTML. So you can just take this and put it in text document. Yeah. Like this. Yeah. So these are the two files you need to run it. And then you should be able to test it in Opera just by I can use the other one for that, this one. Just by dragging the config file into Opera. And you have a very simple widget. And you can take this widget and then just play around with it, change it, start simple, and then just build it up. These are the really most simplest widgets you can make. So it's just like a regular web page that you can make chromeless and drag around on the desktop. We also have the possibility to put it on top on your desktop and then reload it if you change it. So it's just a regular web page. It's like that. To distribute it, you would need to package in a zip file. It's also pretty simple. Just add it to a regular zip file. Zip like this. And then you can go to the widget site and have the possibility to upload it and share it with others. Some text, that's the idea behind it. It's something developers can play with and share their work with others. So it's useful things that work for you. We think others also will have or enjoy those small applications. We also have a widget World Cup we have a competition here, but I will tell some more about that later. And then to the little bit more advanced techniques for widgets. Most of you are familiar with XML HTTP request, or have anybody used it there? How do you get documentation for XML HTTP request? Or if you want to know how it works and if the headers from the request is available, at which ready state is the headers available and things like this, how do you go around on the web and find those things? It's not that, yeah. We have made, these are one of the things that we work with. Charles and I, we are both a member of V3C, and this specification is a pretty new one. It's written by one of our colleagues in Opera, and it will try to define the current behavior of XML HTTP request in all browsers. So these are like the documents we produce in V3C. Yeah. So that's one thing you can use. You can use DOM, or the task is you want to fetch some data from the internet. The widget can connect to the internet using XML HTTP request. And you can fetch XML or text and then read it, parse it, and get it into your browser. Show it to the user. So then you would use XML HTTP request, fetch the data, walk through it, and then build up the DOM inside the browsers. And yeah, these are also the regular specifications that at least I use. DOM operations, they are V3C spec. Inner HTML is not specified, but it's one of the nice things that Microsoft has done with their browser. So I use Microsoft's way of doing that, and it will probably be specified sometimes in the future, because it's a nice function. Widgets might also like to persist data. So for instance, if you have a widget like I have some like a weather widget that remembers the weather in some part of the world, then you would use or would need to persist the option to the, or the user chooses Finland, and you would like to persist the option for the weather. Then you would use a function called getPreferenceForKey and setPreferenceForKey, which is on an object called widget. You will be able to use around 10% of the total configured cache in Opera for this storage. And yeah, so don't try to store a lot of information if you are making widgets. These are the more advanced things you can do, or we see people do with widgets. Like some people, they use the canvas, which is a technology from, it was made in web application, or WhatVG, and it's made by Opera, Firefox, and Safari. So some people, they make very advanced, I think I got one here, something, like this widget, for instance, which is made in a 3D canvas. And it's a very advanced widget, but some people, they use this, and hopefully we'll see some browser demos using canvas now, because that's a new technology that first now, we think it will become part of the regular web as we know it. It's great for making games, it's great for making presentation, and beautiful for widgets and demos. So, SVG, Charles showed the SVG widget. Most of the clocks we use are based on SVG. This is a regular widget. You can zoom it just like a regular page in Opera with plus and minus. You can show. Yeah. These are like a tool for the tiny URL, which you are probably familiar with, that takes a big, ugly URL and converts it. It's a very, very simple widget, just HTML, very, very short. Some news widgets we have. And these are just examples of what people create with widgets today. Yeah. Reminders. So just small widgets. These, for instance, would also need to persist their data. the news widget would need to fetch data from the internet. So these are just very simple examples of what people make. You can use the audio API for sound if you would like to have sound in your widget or your demo or in the Canvas presentation or your game. You can use XSLT XPath, which is becoming mainstream regular web technology that gets into the browser. All major browsers will support it sooner or later. A lot of third-party libraries you can use in the widgets. Opera, they got a library for animation, for parsing feeds, for doing the basic stuff, so we don't need to write that code. jQuery is a nice, simple library for doing AJAX applications. Yahoo, they have some great libraries for doing user interface. Widgetize, I can just quickly show you a service that we made for so it's this is just a very simple service to make a skeleton widget. So you can take, for instance, RSS feed. If I go to Opera and we got the RSS feed. Don't want to subscribe to it. I can take it from source code. And then create a widget. Choose a skin for it, and the widget gets created and takes the feed and lets me. Well, it's just a basic widget, but it would be nice to watch the code on those widgets because they are pretty good written. Yeah. I would just mention the Widget World Cup. We have a competition on making widgets. Its prices is €1,000 in each country, like a national prize. So we will, if you are born in 2 countries, it's a great opportunity to get some money. So it's an overall winner, which we will announce in September, will win 2,000. And that's like demo. Just make some widgets that are useful for you and share them, upload them to the widget site. That is widgets.opera.com, and yeah, participate. We also will have a special prize for the Widget World Cup here at Assembly, where widgets that are made here by people that are at this place and participating in the Widget World Cup will be able to win some extra prizes, which is N90 mobile phone, a 770 Nokia, and the Nintendo DS. All products will come with Opera browsers. The Nintendo DS is not released yet, so we will probably need to give you the Japanese version of the browser until the final is released. So that's just a simple introduction to widgets from us. Web technology. That's one of, actually, there is a spec that we will write. It's Charles and I am the editor of that spec, and it's going to be a V3 spec. But today you cannot open a raw socket. But the plan is to have a V3C spec in the Web Application Working Group where you can do regular TCP connections. I don't know if it will be on a socket level, but yeah, it will probably be TCP. One other option you can use today, if you have like your special device, is to make a server, because you can. No. Yeah, it's more pain. Yeah. Any other questions?
what is the reason that you use a method of your own to store preferences and not cookies?
Because here the widgets, they get installed on, I've played with cookies for a long time, trying to push things into it. But cookies are really meant for something completely different. It's meant for a page that is living on the server and gets downloaded from the server. But here the application is living on the client already. So then cookies, you can still set cookies on the client, but it's more pain than gain. So
cookies are too small, basically.
You can
and not flexible enough.
In cookies in Opera, you can set 120 kilobytes, but you can only read 5 kilobytes out. With the widgets, you can store like 1 megabyte for each widget. If you really want to do it, and if you know what you're doing, you can do that. You can store a lot more. You can store 100 megabytes if you like for a widget. The preference for key and the get preference for key and set preference for key, you might notice that it got a really stupid name. Or no, the name is not stupid, but it's how you call it. Because the set preference for key takes the preference before the key. And that's OS X guidelines. These functions are the same as on dashboard widgets. So we have just copied it. Because we want you, in theory, to produce the same widgets on dashboard today and on Opera. We haven't seen that much widgets, but we have the possibility, so we have the same API.
So is there some kind of work going on to develop a kind of standards-based widget platform, just like web pages?
It's basically Charles and we have been pushing on that, and Opera is pushing on that, and we are talking with some Firefox developers that really would like to see widgets inside Firefox. Firefox, they use extensions today, which is really great, great stuff, but it's not really based on HTML or real standard specs yet. I think it will become a standard, but not yet. So some people, they prefer to see widgets running in Firefox as well. So I think we will see it. And yeah.
So we've been pushing. I go around and talk to managers at companies and hassle them, and they say, "Oh, we'll talk to the lawyers," and the lawyers say, "Oh, we'll talk to the marketing," and that stuff takes forever. But there is active work to make that happen. And as Gorm said, we've copied stuff to do it the way Dashboard does it. AOL have their IAM Alpha stuff where they make what they call modules. It's the same thing. It's a bit of standards-based web code that you can put into a web page in their case. And there are ways of making these things compatible. Even today, there are, amongst the Opera widgets, there are some Dashboard and Opera compatible or AOL and Opera compatible widgets. I made an AOL and Opera cross-platform widget, and it took me about an hour. And like I said, I'm not a coder, so it's not that hard yet. There are edges and nasty bits, but it will get easier in practice, and it will get easier with specifications you can read to tell you how that works.
Two smaller questions. The first one, you mentioned that you're using the cache to store the actual data for the widget. Although the method is called store and get preference, for me that sounds a bit weird. Like the cache is something that should be volatile and possible to go away. So should I handle my data that way, or?
The cache is, if you clear the cache in Opera, you will lose your widget data today. So it's just part of the cache. That's how it's designed now.
Okay, which leads me a bit to the other question, is that I have no idea about that really, so I'm curious. As far as I know, in Apple, the dashboard is kind of integrated on operating system level as a part of your desktop. So it's a more integral thing than just an extension that another program that runs like Opera provides me. So there seems to be a conceptual gap a little bit.
So it's kind of tricky. I mean, Apple has an operating system, right? And they have a browser in their operating system, and they use basically that kind of technology to run their widgets because it's web-based technology. Opera doesn't build an operating system, but it does build a browser that you can run on an awful lot of different platforms, and you can actually do some reasonably powerful applications that just run in the browser. So one of the things about widgets is they provide at some level a platform you can build on above the operating system. You don't need to rely on the underlying operating system because you're just building web technology. And that's always been one of the promises of the web. You can make documents for the web in a way that you could never do in the 80s. You write documents in the 80s and you had to have the right file format, and you had to have the right physical storage medium, and you had to have the right encodings used in the storage medium. It was a nightmare. Where the web came along, it was like all of a sudden it started with documents. You could write documents and you could just send them to people and they would work. So there's kind of two, I don't think there's a conceptual gap. It's like one way of mirroring that today is you send people a Word document, right? Everybody buys Microsoft Word, so you just send them a Word document. And everybody buys Windows, so you just send them a Windows application. And it turns out in the world that I live in that that's not true. That actually, people don't buy the same operating system, people don't buy the same systems. So web browsers have this place at the moment where they actually provide a platform you can build on. If you wanted to build the highest performance game that's ever been seen, you're probably not going to do it as a bit of JavaScript and HTML, right? Then you're going to dig into the code and make it work for your platform. If you want to provide a little timer that goes tick, 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 shut up, then it's not rocket science. You can make it run on a phone, so why not build it at that higher level using the sort of simple tools that you get to do that. So I don't want to say that the browser takes over the operating system or that the browser replaces the operating system. They're at a different level, but we see some of the functionality that used to only be available at the operating system level moving up to be available at the browser level.
Also, I would say that the dashboard widgets, we see the widgets people create, the dashboard widgets, they are created to look nice. It's just something that you have on your desktop handy. They are not so functional. The widgets people create for Opera has until now been really functional stuff. So it's not about the design. So I think for Apple, the dashboard widgets is just part of their whole brand of the OS X. So it's not really, and they would like to keep it there, I think. So it's a little bit different approach.
Any more for any more?
So what about, for example, devices like TV set-top boxes? Could you maybe make it work so that they're overlaid on moving image video?
If you go down to the Opera stand, then you can go and see Opera running semi-transparent overlaid on a video. Yes, we probably could do that because we already have. And we don't have widgets on those set-top box builds at the moment, but they will be. We've said that we're going to do those. So, yeah, that kind of stuff is you can imagine your TV with your video guide or some simple thing querying the internet. Build it as a widget. Make it HTML, not some complicated special stuff that you burn into a chip in a box and can never change again. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
As
you.
I said, Gorm and I will be over the road or down by the Opera stand. Come along and talk to us. Next talk is also from Opera, the great Boulder Murk.